What's the craziest freak accident that's resulted in death? When I was a 13-year-old boy, I witnessed my grandfather die. He was less than 15 feet away from me when he was decapitated by shrapnel from a broken piece of heavy farm equipment. I'm 50 years old and still struggle with that moment in time. PTSD can be a real female dog. Next story. There was this guy 3 to 4 years my junior in high school who I sometimes bumped into. A few years after graduating from high school, I read the local newspaper and saw him there. Apparently, just like most teenagers, one night he had a heated discussion with his family and then stormed out whatever room he was in, slamming the door behind him. Well, the door was a door window and the glass broke and a shard of it stabbed him in the leg. He died from blood loss at home, before the ambulance even showed up. He must have been 17 years old at the time. A real tragedy. Next story. When I was a teenager, 10 years ago or so, my babysitter, a sweet middle-aged woman with a husband and 3 college-age children, from when I was a child, died. Apparently, she was at a friend's house and went to go to the bathroom. She opened the door and the room was dark, so she stepped in to find the light switch. Turns out it was actually the stairs to the basement, and she fell to the bottom and hit her head really badly. If I remember correctly, she was in a coma-like state for a few days and then passed away. Since I was still a kid, some details were probably left out. I don't even think there was a funeral for her because she was Jehovah's Witness. I haven't heard from any of her family since, and I drove by her house a few months ago just to find that it's vandalized and the yard looks like a jungle. Apparently, her husband died a few months ago, and no one is taking care of the house. Just sad altogether. I'm obviously way over this, but I still miss the way she said my name. Very tragic story, but also I can't believe that their home is now covered with graffiti and vandalism. That's very disrespectful. I hate to hear that. Next story. My 20-year-old brother died whitewater rafting in Thailand with a group of friends. Fell out of the raft and he couldn't grab the rope they throw out for you in White Rapids and drowned. They also had no defibrillators on site. Please, anyone reading this, if you're considering whitewater rafting, don't do it. It's so incredibly dangerous. There's really nothing they can do if you fall out other than hope you can grab a measly rope whilst been thrown around rapids and can take a fit and healthy grown adult in minutes. I will never get over it for the rest of my life. Next story. I got a few. Just a month ago, a friend was riding his Harley home from work. Some meatball kid tried to slipstream around traffic, didn't see him, and nicked his bike. He died from the crash and road rash. Because he was wearing a beanie helmet, the road ripped off his jawline and he bled out before EMS could get there. In college, a pal of mine was riding one of those open-top Jeeps around some mountain ledges. His dog, who was harnessed in, did something, they think, and distracted him. The Jeep hit the inside wall, then careened off the cliff barrier, and he popped out of his seatbelt, over the hood, and fell 100 feet into the ravine. His hand was still in the dog's harness, with the dog in the Jeep. And last, a high school friend of my brother's in the middle 1980s stopped to help someone with a flat tire. While he kneeled to look at the flat, the other driver shot him in the back of his head. That car was stolen, and the murderer stole his car, which they found days later and hundreds of miles away. Case was never solved. Next story. A friend from university died at 24. He always got himself in some right states when he was drinking. I even walked out of my room to find him peeing into the hallway cupboard at 3 in the morning once. He didn't even live with us, and none of us knew he was there or how he got in. Anyway, after a bit of a reunion night out, he was found the next morning in the grounds of the hotel unconscious. Best we can figure is he couldn't figure out how to get in, tried to climb over the wall, fell, and hit his head. He died of a stroke a few weeks later. People who knew someone who died in a freak accident, what happened? A mom went ice skating, little slip, fell. All everyone saw was her bump her head lightly. Family finished skating. On the ride home, she started speaking gibberish. Dad dropped kids at the grandparents', took mom to the ER. Brain swelling, coma, dead a week later. Next story. A guy I knew was setting up a rope swing over a lake for his kids and their friends, which he had done many times before. He always would take a practice swing himself before he would let the kids go. His hand slipped off the rope and he fell before he was over the lake. He hit his head on a rock and died in front of the kids. So this is like the second or third story that we've had about a parent passing away in front of their children. I just can't imagine the trauma that's always going to be embedded, that visual of that happening. Just awful to hear. Next story. Girl I grew up with was driving home in college and got into a horrible car accident that gave her brain damage and pretty much removed her jaw from her skull. Tons of surgery, and 3 years later, she walked down the aisle at her wedding. She was in her yard a few months after her wedding and slipped, tripped, and felt dizzy and fell. They aren't sure, and hit her head on pavement patio, and her husband found her dead. Next story. My best friend died in a helicopter malfunction/wreck. The worst part? It was a training exercise. Equipment malfunctioned, killing him and another young man. Edit. Forgot there was also another case of this where I worked at the time. Didn't know either of the young men, but from unknown reasons, their helicopter plummeted, exploded, and killed them both. Way to go, U.S. Army. In short, I won't be getting on a helicopter ever. Next story. A college friend of mine was visiting her grandfather on his farm in Florida. She decided to go swimming in the pond alone one night and wasn't around the next morning. They discovered some of her clothing and some of her body by the pond. She'd been eaten by an alligator. I once was alone waiting for friends to arrive at an Airbnb in Jacksonville and thought I'd stroll along the beach in the early evening before they arrived, until I saw a very large log move towards me on the trail there. Alligators are much faster and stronger than most folks realize. Next story. My 18-year-old neighbor. His dad bought him a motorcycle and his mom wasn't too happy when that happened, but they both shrugged it off. One day, my neighbor was coming home from the gym on the motorcycle and a car hit him. His body went flying and dragged him a few feet. He died at the hospital hours later. It was super heartbreaking to hear about. His 2-year death anniversary just passed, May 15th. My heart breaks for his family. He was such a sweet kid, always willing to help others. Only 18. Next story. Friend in college was taking care of his wheelchair-bound cousin, stopped by the side of the road to show him some wildflowers. There was something that happened involving his jacket getting caught in the wheelchair mechanism, and he was crushed and pinned to the side of the van. It was hours before they were found. He didn't make it. Same college, but didn't know the guy. He shook a vending machine hard enough that it fell and crushed him, made national news. Within a week, every vending machine had brackets holding them to the wall. I've seen how much you have to shake a vending machine to make it unstable. He worked hard for that accident to happen. Next story. When I worked on a load at UPS, one of the other loaders tried to race a trailer and save a package and got pinched on the loading dock. When you've loaded a trailer and it pulls out, some of the doors can't be closed because they swing open, instead of being pulled down like a garage door. Sometimes a package will fall out. The trailers move really fast and the drivers don't have a lot of visibility, so you're never supposed to jump down and save a package. A lot of people do it anyway. This guy wasn't quick enough and he got caught between the dock and the deck of the new trailer. It pinched him in half, basically, but they kept the trailer there long enough for him to call his family before he died. Basically, the second the trailer pulled out and relieved pressure, those two arteries that feed blood to your legs just dumped blood out, and that was it for him. Not a good day at work. I never jumped for a package again. Next story. My 14-year-old brother was out innocently playing with his friends. They were swinging on a gate made with 3 chunky, rectangular solid metal bars. Think upside down, right-angled triangle, but it was incredibly heavy. While swinging on it, the gate sheared off its hinges, fell on him and crushed his skull. He died instantly. Thanks to organ donation and through his death, he ended up saving the lives of 7 people. Next story. A bizarre true story that happened on my army base. Some soldiers got the night off and went to their commander's house. After a night of probably heavy drinking, one dude took the night train back to the base. Right after he got off the train, he realized that he forgot his backpack and gun on the train. So he jumped back on the already running train and hanged from the train car, fell and died. Next story. I worked with a guy that was at home cooking in the kitchen. He slipped and hit his head on the counter, went into a coma, and passed away a week later. In a different job, our head accountant was past retirement and was just finishing out the year. One weekend, he was cleaning out his gutters and fell from a ladder, breaking his leg. His leg got better, so he took the family on a camping trip, and he died in the camp shower from a blood clot. Next story. Not much of an accident, I suppose, but my little brother suffered from type 1 diabetes. Gotta take insulin shots frequently, every day. He'd had it for 15 years, but still barely made an effort to handle it because he never got comfortable with having to stab himself daily. One evening, he went to bed with a low blood sugar, something he'd admitted to doing many times before that. We'd scold him for constantly and warned him it would kill him, and just didn't wake up the next day. I saw him on the 5th, found out he was gone by the 8th. If it had been my mother or father, it would have made sense, but to lose my baby brother so suddenly just feels so wrong. Next story. Knew a guy who was in a car crash and saw his aunt almost beheaded. He was about 10, screwed up his mind. At about 20, he flipped his dirt bike with his girlfriend on the back and it cracked her head open. Was deep in the woods camping. She died. A couple years later, he was stealing a motorcycle, walking it across the street at night in the rain and got hit by a car. Lost a leg. A couple years after that, he was angry at a music venue, so he and a friend tried to build a bomb in the parking lot. It went off and they both were killed. It sounds like, I know the guy was messed up, but, took one too many gambles. I think building a bomb appropriately was the end of his reign. Next story. My cousin was killed by Chrysler. There was a defect in the hatch of Chrysler minivans, where if they were hit from the inside, they would open unexpectedly. My aunt was moving the car out of the driveway so the other kids could play hockey or whatever, just backing the car into the street. She put my cousin in the back so he wouldn't run behind the car as she pulled out. They lived in a little cul-de-sac, no danger of other vehicles. One of the kids called her name, so she hit the brakes. My cousin lost his balance and hit the inside of the hatch, which opened. He fell out and hit his head and was taken off life support 3 days later. It later came out that this issue was raised by an engineer, and when he wouldn't drop it, Chrysler fired him rather than fixing it. From a very young age, I've understood that corporations don't give a F about anything but money. Every pride flag, every we stand with X community, every donation to a charity, all calculated efforts to maximize revenue, nothing more. Don't ever kneel at the corporate altar. They can all burn for all I care. Next story. My grandpa, at age 76, was boating off the Potomac River and they were docking, but there was too much slack in the dock rope. As he was stepping off the boat, it moved away from the dock and he fell between the dock and the boat and got beat up and went underwater. The current was swift there, and he came up for air, hollering for help once, then went back under. They didn't find him for hours. He drowned in the Potomac. That phone call from my mom still haunts me. Hardest death I've ever had to grieve. Even harder was having to go down there and pick up his car. Also, it took them 3 days to transfer his body home. He was boating from Northern Neck, VA, a few hours from home. Makes me sick, too. His house was immaculate. None of us could afford a second mortgage, so we had to sell it. The new owners absolutely destroyed it and went to foreclosure and is completely gutted inside, and they destroyed the pool and pool house. Next story. Not really a freak accident, but a horrible sequence of events. When I was a kid, I used to live in a home for the disabled because my dad had muscular dystrophy. It was like one big residential complex with a few houses with safety features, ramps, alarms, etc. We lived in one of those houses next door to a quadriplegic. On his wedding day, him and his new wife and her 2 kids got home from the reception to find they were locked out. He decided to climb in a window but fell and broke his spine. He was picked up by an ambulance and rushed to the hospital. The wife and kids followed in the car, but on the way there, got into an accident and were all killed. Next story. A friend of a friend showed up at his girlfriend's apartment with a head wound. He didn't know how it happened. He also didn't know how he drove over there. She took him to the ER where he ended up passing away. He had his keys, wallet, and phone on him. The only thing we could think of is he might have tripped, fell, and hit his head in the wrong spot. Next story. My neighbor was cleaning his gutters and fell off his roof because he missed his footing when stepping. Fell right on his head. This was a few years back now, but the family moved quickly after, even though it had been their house for like 30 years. I can't say I blame them. Yeah, I think in a situation like this, just kind of creating some distance, getting away from the scene of where it happened would ultimately prove to be better for the sake of moving on and accepting. I feel like if you stay in the house, everything that you see, every part of that house is just going to remind you of him and just keep you in that sad, mourning, depressed state. Next story. A guy I went to high school with got hit by a train. It wasn't self-unaliving. It was before Uber and he had been at a party drinking. He did the responsible thing by taking the subway. When he heard the train coming, he stood up to take a step forward, like everyone does, but was so drunk that he stumbled over his own feet and fell onto the track. Next story. Lovely girl I went to high school with got a scholarship to a prestigious university, being one of very few students from my crappy school to make it to college or uni. 2 weeks into term, her roommate found her laying in her bed dead. The heating boiler was faulty and she died of carbon monoxide poisoning in her sleep. We'd even thrown a party for her to celebrate her achievement. This was in 1996 and I'm tearing up a bit thinking about this. R.I.P. Sonia. Next story. I have a few colleagues, just in the last 8 months alone. One was killed when a drunk semi-truck driver drove through the gas pump he was fueling up at, left 5 kids behind. Another was an accomplished and experienced athlete. killed when a snowmobile flipped on him, left 3 kids. The third was practicing on a closed road, professional driver, closed course situation. The car left the road by a few feet and he was impaled on a fence post. It's been a crap year. Next story. An old buddy I had known since elementary school died while driving when a chunk of loose gravel was kicked up through his windshield by a passing truck on the freeway. His best friend had been riding in the passenger side and had to steer the car to safety. It was nobody's fault, just a complete freak accident. I've always felt terrible for the friend who had to watch it happen. I think about my friend who died a lot. He was a really cool guy. I still remember playing basketball with him during recess when we were kids. It's strange to think that he never could have known how his life would end or see it coming in any way. That kid I used to play basketball with thought he still had an entire life ahead of him. Next story. I used to work for a septic company. A guy who drove one of the big septic trucks that sucked out the underground septic tanks at people's houses had to get on his hands and knees and reach into the tank because the lid had fallen in. He lost his balance and fell headfirst in. His shoulders got wedged in the opening and he drowned upside down in human waste. I don't think I've ever heard of a worse way to go. The homeowner found him after about an hour. Next story. A friend of my dad's was overseeing a repaired braided 3/4 cable being spooled from one drum to another at very high speed and tension. He had his gloved hand loosely on the wire guiding it into position, a big no-no in the industry. A frayed wire came through, snagged his glove, and dragged him into the drum, wrapping him into a contorted paste within seconds. Next story. I was in high school and working retail at a chain furniture store. 2 of my coworkers were sisters. Their mother was in charge of the special ed program at my high school. Their mother had been diagnosed with brain cancer a couple of years ago. She was in remission. She came to work to pick up her 2 daughters and go to her follow-up appointment to make sure still no cancer. Not long after they left and got on the interstate, an 18-wheeler lost control, jumped the median, and hit their car, killing everyone. Her husband was working and could not go to the appointment. He lost his wife and 2 daughters in a second. His whole family gone because an 18-wheeler lost control. Next story. When I was younger and drove 125 CCM bikes, I was in a bike group, consciously not calling it a gang because it wasn't like that. We just rode for fun together, ate and did some tricks, and filmed us, and that was it. One fateful day, we rode together as we always did, on a beautiful mountain road with great weather in late July. The road we were on, which we all knew and rode regularly, had beautiful curves for biking. One of our older members, let's say maybe 18 to 19, somehow lost control of his bike in one of those curves. His bike crashed into the barrier, but he slid into the little vertical metal pole that holds up the barrier. He had full gear on, boots, gloves, complete leather suit with protectors in it, and his helmet. Unfortunately, the pole connected right under his helmet before his suit began and took his head clean off, still inside the helmet. I was maybe 2 bikes behind him, almost at the end of the convoy, so I saw it unfold. It was maybe 1.5 seconds in real time, but I swear time stood still for a good minute or so. Still in shock, I called the cops. One of our members that was closer to him called his father. When his dad came, he had to look at his dead son and all his protective gear and pull out his helmet with his head inside from the encartment behind the barrier. While sitting there contemplating if I would ever ride again, I made one of the biggest mistakes in my life and got a glimpse of his face while it was carried out of the debris. The look of sheer terror frozen in time. I'll never forget it. As he was one of the best riders in this group, we looked everywhere for anything that might have caused the loss of control. Leaves, dirt, water, oil, anything on the road. We didn't find anything. The sun was shining, his bike was always clean and finely tuned, and according to the cops, there weren't even any recent crashes in this part of the road for a potential oil spill or leftover debris or something. To this day, I never got the closure as to why it happened or what may have caused it, but his life ended right then and there. For him, the how doesn't matter anyway. Somewhat selfish even, to look for an answer, as it does nothing about what happened, but I guess humans always want to know the how and why. For everyone that got this far, I'm sorry you had to witness this horror story secondhand now. Ride safe always, and have a beautiful day. This one's really tragic because the guy did literally everything that you could to be safe. He had all of his protective gear on, he was riding safely, and still, freak accident happens, and, he loses his life in a horribly gruesome way. Just very tragic. Next story. One of my best friends, one that was in my close circle, and we all interacted near daily, that I had known since high school, at least 15 or 16 years. He was a driver for FedEx, and February last year, some guy crossed over the grassy middle of the highway and hit his truck head on. Both died. The added sting for me was at the time I was overseas visiting my grandpa, who was bedridden and diagnosed with a terminal cancer. Last year was a bad year for me. Next story. My son was born full term, 9 pounds, after a normal, healthy pregnancy. His heart had stopped during the last 10 minutes of an otherwise normal delivery. Turns out, the 6 inches of umbilical cord closest to his body had a defect and was compromised when his shoulder were delivered, causing irreversible brain and organ injury. His heart stopped for the last time this day 12 years ago while I held him in my arms. Next story. I'm of an older generation, so please forgive the dated references. Anyone remember Sonny Bono's death? I served with a captain who I became good friends with. As good as Army regulations allowed, anyway. Well, the year I retired, we wound up at the same post, excited to see if we'd work together again. Valentine's Day, 2015, she and her fiancé decided to take some time off and go skiing. She lost control and rammed headfirst into a tree, died at the scene. She was 32, absolutely gutted her friends and family. Next story. I don't know these people, but there was an incident a few years back at a park in my city. A couple were laying on the grass under a tree when apparently one of the branches snapped off and came tumbling down. The man jumped onto this woman to protect her and got the back of his skull cracked open by the impact and died. They left a cross on the grass where he passed away for a while. Sad story, and I can't imagine the horror and sadness the woman went through with such a freak random accident. Next story. My partner went to college with a guy who dug a really deep, narrow hole, 10 feet-ish, at the beach, and it collapsed in on him. People tried to uncover him, but he was already gone by the time they could get him out. My friend watched his best friend fall off a cliff in Yosemite. They worked at the park, and the guy would do this thing where he would get naked and do a handstand at the edge of cliffs for a funny picture. Of course, eventually he fell, and my friend watched it. Next story. My dad told me a story once about an accident that happened while he was working at a foundry. Apparently, they had this machine that was essentially a giant sandblaster in a booth, and a guy was inside of it working on it. Someone else didn't know there was a person in there and activated it. The material that sandblasters use is very, very fine, and being inside what was pretty much a giant industrial sandblaster was super deadly. According to my dad, the guy weighed over 1,000 pounds when they pulled him out of it. I'm not sure about that part. It sounds like a bit of an exaggeration, but still, it sounds like a horrible way to die. Next story. 10-year-old cousin of mine was playing on the farm with a bunch of other kids. She tripped and grabbed hold of the metal wire fence nearby and was electrocuted. An electric cable had broken off the power line and was hung on the fence. One of the kids also grabbed the fence because he thought she was faking and got electrocuted too. Both passed away. Next story. I don't know them, but worked opposite some building works in central London. They were having some huge windows installed, very thick and heavy glass, which was stored incorrectly, kind of leaned against the building. A girl walked past it and was, I believe, on a call, so had stopped walking, and somehow the glass pane fell on top of her, crushed to death. Walked past that every day on the way to work. The evening it happened, I walked past a white tent with forensics around. So tragic. Next story. My sister-in-law's aunt died of hypothermia. She went for a walk out in the hills in the winter. She knew the trail very well, but got disoriented by a light snowfall and got lost. She got cold and tired, laid down by a rock, and died of hypothermia. She was 100 yards from her car. Next story. Teacher in my school lost all 3 kids in a freak accident on the highway. Their car lost a tire, which caused them to swerve into the gas tank of a semi-truck, which exploded, killing 2 of them instantly. The 3rd kid managed to crawl out of the car while he was on fire and died later in the hospital. The saddest part is they were all on their way to visit their father in the hospital after his back surgery. Next story. If you live in corn-heavy Midwest areas of America, you're probably familiar with detasseling. Detasselings's a job a lot of smaller towns will let kids do. I think from 13 up, with parental permission. It's very common where I'm from. Essentially, you just walk with a group of other people through cornfields, pulling a tassel off the top to prevent from germinating and seeding excessively. Anyway, like 2 years after I did it, there was an accident involving 2 high school freshmen stepping into a puddle that an electric irrigator was shorting into. One of them basically died immediately, the other en route. Next story. Had a classmate who was working outside, got stung by a wasp and had an allergic reaction and died less than 24 hours later. He was married 7 months and they were working on starting a family. His wife had to make the final decision as he was completely brain dead. Next story. A family friend bumped his head, walked about 15 feet across his backyard, sat at his picnic table, and died. Autopsy showed no head trauma, but he broke his neck when he hit his head. They figured the walk across the yard caused something to shift enough to do fatal damage to his spinal cord. Next story. Former coworker of mine was gored by a bison while on a trail run. Ironically, he even posted on message boards for the park to be aware of wild animals while there. And in one post, he said there are too many people with headphones on, or trying to get too close to the bison to take selfies. He was normally very careful, apparently. Next story. Kid I was friends with in middle school was riding his bike without a helmet, hit a rock and went head over handlebars right at the T intersection. As he was getting up, an old lady driving on the cross street somehow dropped her glasses and bent over to pick them up. Didn't see him. The coroner said that Nick would have survived either crash on its own, but the combination of the two killed him. He used to sneak into class early before school and draw a little flower pot with the cartoon Daisy in it, and then he'd write the words, "Hello, flower," under it. He must have done that 100 times. The day after he died, the teacher let the whole class draw "Hello, flower" on the chalkboard. Next story. My friend's boyfriend's family. His dad died after a long illness. Boyfriend's two older brothers, one an Air Force pilot, rented a puddle jumper to fly over their dad's favorite lake to scatter the ashes. The place they rented the plane from had lied about the plane passing inspection, and they crashed soon after takeoff. The pilot's brother died, but they said he managed to land the plane in such a way so that his passenger brother survived. Surviving brother is now paralyzed from the neck down. So, in a matter of days, his poor mother lost her husband, her son, and became full-time caretaker of her now paralyzed son. Next story. I wish I didn't have this story, but a girl I went to high school with was at a gas station filling up her mom's van during spring break with a friend visiting her from college. A woman hopped the curb, losing control of her car, and ran into a truck on the other side of the pump. The truck sent the pump into her and pinned her between it and her van. It caught fire, and no one could get into her house because of the flames. She could be heard screaming, "Help me! I'm going to die!" Literally was the most shocking and sad story I've ever heard. I knew her brother pretty well, and it was just so surreal and heartbreaking, especially because they were twins. Next story. My brother was killed beside me when we were walking home from school. A drunk driver came peeling past down the street and hit him. He was dead on impact. The car sideswiped me so fast I didn't know what happened at first. 1 second we were walking, the next second there's a thud noise, and suddenly I'm whipping around in a circle and landing on the ground. Turns out the guy was going 168 kilometers an hour in the 40 kilometers an hour school zone. I can't think of a single scenario where it is appropriate to more than quadruple the speed limit in any situation. That's horrible, and the collateral damage as a result. Super tragic. Next story. My uncle died in a car crash instantly when he was T-boned. Sadly, my cousins were in the car and saw him pass away. They had no injuries. About 10 years later, my oldest cousin got in his car drunk and high, hit a pole, and went flying in the ditch. He also died instantly. Because of the trauma, he turned to drugs, and he ended up dying the same way as his dad in the end. So sad. Next story. Good family friend of ours from Central Georgia. About 30 years ago, the mom was driving home with their 2-year-old in the car. She was crossing the train tracks about a mile away from their house. This train track didn't have an arm that comes down. Still doesn't to this day. She crossed the tracks and got hit by the train. The toddler was flung from the car, strapped into his car seat, and hit a tree. He died on impact. The mom survived. The paramedics found her screaming hysterically looking for the baby. The parents won a settlement because it turns out that model of car had a recall on faulty seatbelts in the back seat. I still feel nauseated when I think about their story. They went on to have 3 kids, all born after Brandon died. They've obviously never been the same. Next story. I was a freshman, she was a senior. One day it was lunchtime and she was walking around outside. Later I learned from one of her friends she was looking for me. And 2 of our school's rednecks with their big-ass trucks were racing through the parking lot to get out and go to a fast food restaurant for their lunch. She got pinned between their trucks, died 4 days later in the hospital. Next story. A friend of the family was out hunting. It was getting near dusk, so he was riding an ATV back toward home. As he rode along, he was hit in the face by a 50-pound great horned owl. He had been wearing aviator sunglasses, and they caught and reflected the last rays of the setting sun. Apparently, owls hunt by looking for light reflecting from the eyes of their prey, so it saw the reflection from the glasses and attacked him. The impact snapped his neck back with so much force that it broke his neck, killing him instantly. That was a blessing because the owl's talons caught his upper lip and degloved the top half of his face. Next story. My mom, R.I.P., died of a sudden heart failure. The freak part about it was that it was caused by a growth of tissue behind her heart that caused it to enlarge to 3 times the normal size. She was a hypochondriac and was at the doctor's office constantly for years. Multiple eyes on her, tons of scans, x-rays, etc. for decades, and the growth went completely unnoticed until it was too late. A simple sonogram would have detected it in time to treat, but those are rarely, if ever, done on people's hearts. Usually they're reserved for pregnancies alone. I'm scheduling mine soon. Next story. My brother was sent to a camp for troubled teens. Religious bullcrap. Anyways, he was riding in the bed of a pickup and the driver was driving like an idiot. Crashed, brother went flying, traumatic brain injury. He died later that night, but he was basically gone from the time he landed. There is an article in Rolling Stones about it and the treatment he experienced at the camp. Then there is a manhunt, unrelated to the accident, but head of the camp, for the head camp guy that culminated in nothing happening. F religious bullcrap camps for teens. Next story. A friend of mine had a motorcycle accident. None of us know exactly how it happened, as no one saw the collision, but he hit a rock barrier on the side of the road and died on impact. I had moved overseas when it happened and found out via voice note in a group chat we were in. I just listened to a voice note that morning because it was odd for this friend to send them there. And all he said was, "Guys, a friend who died had an accident. He's gone. Guys, he's gone." He came around the corner to see his body about 10 seconds after it happened. I can't imagine what he must have experienced. Next story. 2 laborers driving back from a work site hit a rock in the darkness and was unable to free the vehicle. It was the most unlucky series of events we had come across. They would have been rescued if they were able to radio in, but their GSMR radio's batteries had fallen flat from using it all day performing crane operations. They also did not pack the charging cable it came with. It would have had a cigarette lighter adapter on it to charge in the vehicle. On top of all that, they were in a location with no cell phone coverage and about 100 kilometers away from anybody in the Arabian desert. The emergency alarm button located in the vehicle hadn't been installed, as it was one of the new fleet of pickups and it was awaiting an appointment to be fitted. This was the Thursday night, which is the start of the weekend, and so nobody checked on them as everybody who lived on their compounds were busy relaxing, enjoying the day off. They slept in the pickup overnight and must have spent all day Friday and Saturday attempting to free the vehicle from the rock. At one point, it appeared they tried to use their shovels and the car jack for leverage. We were never sure why they didn't just attempt to start walking at least, but in 40-degree conditions, it's easy to see how they would be less inclined to leave the safety of the truck. On Sunday morning, after several attempts to make contact with the 2 workers, the team leader decided to drive along the railway and through the known routes to find the team. He was unfortunately met with the truck still stuck on the rock, and the 2 workers died, having run out of water and unable to contact anyone. One of the workers laid inside the pickup and the other took rest under the truck. That incident changed a lot of how we manage teams going forward. It really shook everybody to the core. These 2 workers were from the Philippines who came to the Middle East to earn money for their families. It's unfortunate they had to go out that way. They were extremely unlucky with all of the worst case scenarios lining up, but sometimes that's all it takes. Never say never. Next story. Swimming, and one of my buddies was screwing with the grate thing over a drain at the bottom, got his foot stuck and couldn't extricate himself. His brother, cousin, and I nearly drowned trying to free him, so we got to watch him die. Haven't thought about this one in a bit. Next story. Pretty rough set of downhill S-turns for trucks on a 2-lane road. Plenty of memorials. While my friend and her mother are going up a hill, a flatbed coming down the hill was loaded with rebar going into angel gear and was arriving to the same bend as my friend and her mother. The bands of the truck holding the rebar snapped from the force of the turn, sending an open spoil of half-inch rebar spearing through the driver's side of the window, leaving the daughter untouched in the passenger. Death for the mother was not instantaneous. To add salt to the wound, she had just finished convincing her mom to take her to get a skateboard so she could hang with her skater friends, me and others. Gosh, R.I.P. JJ. Next story. A friend of mine from college had a summer job driving a big delivery truck. At the end of the day, they'd come back, park the trucks, and then check tires to make sure they weren't overheated or required any other maintenance. So my friend brought his delivery truck back after his shift, then knelt down in front of it to check the tires. One was clearly overheated, so he loosened it to take it off and relieve some of the pressure and heat. The pressure was so great that tire exploded in his face, but that wasn't what killed him. When it exploded, the hubcap/metal inner wheel, apologies, I'm blanking on what the metal frame of the tire is called, of the tire caught him right under the chin. It knocked him backwards with such force that it crushed the back of his head. He was only 22. Next story. Out celebrating a new promotion, he took a cab home after drinking. Shortly before they arrived home, he asked the driver to pull over as he was feeling nauseous, opened his door to puke, and was hit by an oncoming bus. He was my lab partner in college. We had only been out of school for about a year. I saw his face on the front page of the New York Post where they shamed him for getting drunk. Recently saw his face pop up on LinkedIn asking me to congratulate him on celebrating 8 years at his company. Next story. In 2002, when I was 16, there was a flood in my town. As my daddy drove me to school, we saw a car that had been caught in a flooded underpass. Later that day, I found out the car we passed belonged to my cousin, and she had drowned the night before coming from playing cards at a friend's house. What we never understood was she used her cell phone to call her friend instead of 911 as the car went down. It was sad, and she was only like 40. Next story. My insurance guy was pulling a limb out of a large tree with a chain and a rope. He was behind the pickup. His wife was driving the truck. Rope snapped from the strain, and chain snapped back and hit him in the head, killing him instantly. He was in his 50s. Nice guy, too. Ironic thing is this is exactly the sort of scenario he would describe as to why you need life insurance. Next story. I knew this kid in high school who always ran from class to class pulling his roller backpack behind him. So it's no surprise when he visited the Grand Canyon with family that he wanted to run down the slope. Well, he got going too fast and couldn't stop himself. His entire family watched him run off the side of the Grand Canyon. Oof. Edit. Now that I think about it, some of the people I went to high school with were wild. There is a serial killer who began stabbing homeless people in order to scare his dad into coming home, and also a teacher who scissored another girl during lunchtime. Next story. My uncle was mowing grass on an embankment next to a small body of water. The mower unexpectedly slipped down the embankment and overturned on top of him, pinning him under the water. He drowned in a few feet of water that he otherwise could have stood up in. Edit. Lots of folks asking where and when. Not recent, about 13 years ago in the American Southeast. Based on responses, though, maybe not as much of a freak accident as I thought. Seems to happen a lot. Next story. Had an uncle that lived down at the beach. Used to spend a lot of time out on a Bertram fishing boat. Many beers were usually enjoyed during those times. They used to go out into deeper water and jump off the flybridge, their roof part of the boat where there are controls as well as a place to sit. One day he went out with some friends and they decided to partake in said jumping. Unbeknownst to him, the tide had gone out and they had drifted into shallow water. He dove in headfirst, hit the bottom, and killed him. Next story. Super healthy coworker was driving home to grab some lunch. Truck ahead of him on an incline exploded in its brake drum. Big piece flew off and into his head. There's more. His car drove off the side of the freeway, down an embankment, and crashed violently. Police just assumed he was drunk or stoned and wrote it up that way. A few coworkers knew he didn't touch drugs or booze and went looking for answers. Tracked his car to a wrecking yard and found the shrapnel in the back seat. We were able to find the truck too and piece together what really happened. Next story. Don't know if this counts as a freak accident, but when we were in high school in the UK, we were all at a house party drinking. Got to around midnight, and someone suggests we acquire a certain white powder. A guy a year younger than us at the time, so 15, said he knew somebody his older brother got it from, made a phone call, and off he went to collect. We carry on drinking, dancing, laughing, etc. Nearly 2 hours go by, and we realize this guy hasn't returned, but we gave him the money. We quickly conclude he's done us dirty and ran off with the cash. Get his number from a lass he came with who's still at the party and ring him. She said she's been ringing him for about an hour or so and he hasn't been answering, but never mentioned anything as she was scared that he might have bounced with the money also. He doesn't answer the phone. We go out looking for him. There are 2 alleyways behind the gardens of the house we were at. Go through the garden, into the alley. There's said guy slumped on the floor, eyes open, not breathing. Turns out he met the dealer, who gave him a few bumps of the stuff to try and ended up giving him the wrong bag. Never found out what was in the bag, but this kid had overdosed right outside the back gate and choked on his own vomit. Dealer ran off and left him. Got caught through phone records later down the line, but there was some bullcrap about his alibi stating he never turned up to meet him or something. Did time for possession, and that's it, I believe. Was a long time ago. TLDR, kid tries to buy one substance and accidentally gets given another. ODs and chokes on his own vomit 5 meters from the house. Next story. A buddy of mine from high school, and we also happen to go to the same college. He was handsome, a freak athlete, heavy drinker/partier, all the girls wanted him, and his family was uber wealthy. He had it all, but he was a huge unnecessary risk taker. He felt invincible. He would always succumb to dares or challenges like drinking a whole handle of vodka, and even a gallon of milk. This was in the 2000s. Anyway, one summer break, we were playing golf. He was on the side/outside of the golf cart hanging on while it was being whipped around the course. Hit a big, unexpected bump. He falls off, hits his head on a rock, dies instantly. So effing tragic. Be safe, kids.